Thank you. All right. We are at our February 15th RGC Regional Growth Committee Plan TAC. So just had a conversation with Mayor Soltansky and her staff. This is the committee that we normally have our planners and economic development staff from local communities, DOT, UTA attend. We do CC the elected officials through the communities, just so that they're aware of what we're talking about at a staff level and kind of some of the items on our agenda. They often tie closely with our regional growth committee, which is made up of the elected officials, UDOT, UTA, and other stakeholders. So just little clarification there if anybody's confused. Again, I put the chat in the or put the agenda in the chat. I'll put it in there again. It looks like we've got a couple other people, but what we'll do is quickly go through introductions. I'll just run through every community. Oh, Jordan or Rosie, it looks like there's oh, there you go. Rosie's or Jordan's gonna put one in there. There's an access issue, it looks like. Thanks, Jordan. I probably sent them right to the actual one, not the one posted on our website. So do quick introductions. I'll just run through communities alphabetically. So keep it simple. We'll start with Alta. Bluffdale.
Grant with Bluffdale.
Hey Grant, how you doing?
Good, thanks.
Brighton. Copperton. Cottonwood Heights. Draper.
Scott Cooley here with Draper.
Scott. Immigration Canyon.
Kayla here, representing all the
Terrible.
MSD communities.
Kayla. Holiday. Kearns.
That'd be me again.
Shane Ellis. Shane Ellis here, representing Kearns.
Shane. Magna. Midvale.
Adam Olson with Midvale.
And also Wendelin Knobloch with Midvale.
Thank you. Murray.
Jared Hall, I'm here for Murray.
Riverton.
Matt Castle here for Riverton.
Salt Lake City.
Becca Rolfe here from Salt Lake City.
Becca.
And Julianne Cibula.
And Josh
And
also.
Salt Lake County. Oh, hi Josh.
David Rogers, Salt Lake County Regional Development.
Shane in engineering.
Sandy.
Brittany Ward, Sandy City.
Hi Brittany. South Jordan. Taylorsville, or wait, South Salt Lake, sorry. Taylorsville.
Art McGrath with Taylorsville.
West Jordan.
Larry Gardner with West Jordan.
West Valley City.
Brock Anderson with West Valley.
White City.
Shane Ellis for White City.
UDOT.
Ivana Vladisavljevic, Region 2.
Nice meeting you. UTA.
Matt Gray, UTA Planning.
Mary DiLoretto, UTA. Hey, Jerry.
What you doing? Anybody from Federal Highways? Jordan School District. Vision Utah.
Ari Bruning, Envision Utah.
Also Ryan Beck with Envision Utah.
Thank you. And WFRC staff, quite a few of us. Let's see, we have Ted Knowlton, Jory Johnner, Hugh Van Wagenen, Michaela Jordan, Nikki Navio, Megan Townsend. I'm gonna miss a couple, I know it. Jordan Chandler, Rosie Hernandez, Byron Head, Julie Bjornstad, Ben Wuthrich, Mike Sobchak. I think I got everybody there, hopefully. And if I did not call out a community or organization anybody was in, feel free to introduce yourself, or if you just jumped on. Oh, Lauren Victor, sorry, Lauren.
Michael Malloy, Harriman City Planning Director. Morning.
Thanks, Mike.
Chris Wiltsey, Bike Utah.
Ellen Oakman,
Todd
Bluffdale
Draper.
City.
Todd Draper, Draper City.
Awesome. Thank you very
Jay.
much. Looks like we got a pretty full house. Oh, hey, Jay, sorry.
No worries. Jay Aguilar, UDOT.
Great. All right. We prepared meeting summaries for the December 14th, 2022 meeting. Looking for motion to approve those. Hopefully you all received those in your email for the meeting. I get a brave soul to make a motion.
Motion to approve.
Thanks, Mike. Second,
I'll second. Brittany Ward, Sandy City.
Brittany. All right. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All righty, perfect. All right, first on the agenda, thanks Kayla for, we do keep track and we'll put those in the meeting summaries, the attendance log. They usually are at the end of the meeting summary. So we'll make sure that the MSD groups are representing those communities. Ted, you have our first item.
Okay, thanks, Jory. And I am filling in for Dina on this. So this is sort of a chair-like duty. But, you know, this is our first plan TAC of the year. And as we, you know, get reacquainted as the planning community in Salt Lake County, a key question is, what kind of value should we get from this meeting? Not today, but from Plan TAC. How is it meeting your needs? How should we change it? So I have a few polling questions that we will use to make sure that we get feedback from everybody. And then in addition to that, what we'd like is just to have a short conversation. You're welcome to use the chat box. You're welcome to, we'd love to have you unmute and talk. But let me tell you what the questions are. One, what should we emphasize more within Plan TAC? Two, how often should we meet in person? Three, what are the key things that you'd like to discuss or focus on in this year? And then four, just a wide open, hey, Plan TAC would be even better if fill in the blank. So we'll kind of hit those stepwise. You go to slido.com and you enter in that. And I'm going to give you a QR code right now. I think. I'm sorry. 1 second. Sure. All right. Well, anyway, here, off we go. And I'm sharing screen. I'm narrating my actions on Zoom, which is a best practice. You should always narrate your actions when you are struggling with technical issues. It calms everybody and instills a lot of confidence, I hear.
It's a little scary, Ted, if we're inside the mind of the great Ted Nolson.
All right, so there you go. So now you can use the QR code. I'll just leave that up for 6 seconds if you like QR code. functioning of the technical advisory committee. Okay. Here are the options on that first one. Which of the following objectives should receive greater emphasis? You can pick as many as you want. We have been using this to get input on Wasatch Choice and the WFRC Regional Transportation Plan, networking between planners, discussing shared challenges, hear about planning best practices, provide input on countywide initiatives, hear more from peers, have a chance to talk about what's happening in your community, hear about state planning efforts. And then I know that we obviously haven't been exhaustive on that. If you have an idea of, hey, this should have been on the list, will you put that into the chat or just unmute and say it? And then Jory, I can't see the chat that easily, so you might have to look for that.
I'll watch that for you, Ted. So far, nothing.
I'd love to have.
Looks like
some- yeah,
I was just gonna say there's 54 people in this room. We currently have 21 people in the, or you can see it in the top right there, 22 people in the Slido. I don't know if you want to watch that a little closely, or if people are having a hard time getting into the Slido, let us know. We can kind of give you a couple minutes to get that figured out.
Just to be clear, Ted, WFRC staff is not participating in this poll
I
directly.
actually think that they can. I think everybody can participate in this.
Do it.
Yeah, but it's a good question, Hugh. Does anybody want to talk about something not on the list, or if you want to elaborate on why you picked what you picked, just for a minute? It's early. We didn't do calisthenics. There was no lively hold music as we warmed up for this meeting. You know, back in the day, we used to have Plan TAC and we featured 3 breakfast meats. I think we had bacon, ham, and sausage. You could combine them all on the same sandwich. I think it was an unholy affront to nature, but it tasted good. Let's go to the next one. How often should we aim to meet in person? All right. You could answer it as, how many times would you personally be willing to show up with the promise that other people would be there, and we break bread, we actually visit physically together?
Ted, I totally answered this as how often should we meet and not in person? And so I just wrote all of the time, but now I see that it's in person. So I was a little
Julie-
offended people only wanted to meet twice a year in general, but that's in person.
The nice thing is I think at the bottom you can edit your response and switch that up if you
I
like.
still think it's all of the time. I want to meet with everyone on this call all of the time.
Okay, and we'll just move on from this here in just a couple of seconds. This one is pretty straight ahead. This is an open one, so and you can enter it as many items in this as you'd like to. What are the key things that you'd like to discuss in Plan TAC in 2022? I don't know if I know we have some Slido experts. I know the Envision Utah folks use Slido a lot. If as we move past questions, can people go back and still respond to earlier questions? Does anybody know the answer to that?
At least Ted, at my end as a user right now, I can't find a spot that lets me go back.
Yeah, I'll second that. I'll second Jory. I was just trying to go back and test that. I couldn't do it.
Okay. So I won't do a dramatic reading of everything, but perhaps we look a little bit together for themes. Parking, bikes, multimodal, performance measures, climate, transit, legislative mandates, This is a bad dramatic reading. Collaborative efforts, unintended effects. Does somebody want to elaborate on the unintended effects of transportation policy decisions? You don't have to, but that's an interesting one.
And on this one too, you can add a response. It's allowing us to do more than one.
Yes. How many of you feel like, hey, look, this is a great place to focus more on transportation and how transportation affects fill in the blank, land development, economic development, the environment. And that it is purposeful for us to focus on transportation, meaning that we focus less on housing or general land use questions. I don't know if any of you feel like that. And I'm just partly reacting to kind of the list that's coming up, which tends to be more in that direction. Oh, I do see housing plan implementation. All right, anything in the chat box to reference here? I would love to have one person say something about something that you entered in here before we go on to the next slide. So one kind and generous person, just talk a little bit about something that you entered. What's an echelon intersection? Never heard of that. Or not, or that's okay. Let's keep going then. Last question on this, just to keep us rolling ahead. I'm presuming I'm still unmuted. Plan TAC. Yes, go ahead.
You're unmuted. And I was also just going to mention the parking. We should have our modernization study done this year. And we'll have a little parking thing later on as well. But I put that one. I was trying to talk so that somebody else might feel encouraged to talk or answer your question about what an echelon intersection is.
What is an echelon intersection?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
But somebody on the call does know. A grade separated intersection where one approach on both roadways is elevated to create a pair.
I also Googled it, Julie, and it looks exciting. I'd love to hear about it.
I was gonna ping Brittany because I think, or Michael Fazio, we got some engineers in here that know this stuff.
I sent Michael the video of it yesterday. It's something they told us they might be thinking about south of the point, so I had to Google it myself. Virginia DOT has a cool video on it.
I'm not sure what that means, actually.
Okay, any parting thoughts on this particular agenda item before we move on? I think that, this is, I guess I have a parting question for you, which is not part of the Slido, but how much do you all want to be involved in agenda development? I mean, we could send you a draft agenda in advance with an eye towards flushing out, like birds in a meadow, additional ideas that you might have. That can be a little bit unwieldy to do that across the entire membership, but I'm just trying to think about how you want to be involved in the agenda development. One thing that we always do, I actually will pause and listen, but one thing that we always do is at the end of each meeting, we say, we ask for future agenda items, so we will keep doing that. And now I'm stopping in case anybody has any other parting thoughts on this. I will say that this particular question will remain up in Slido. I will stop sharing, but you can keep adding into this. And you can use this as a catch-all if you have other ideas for the for the functioning and programming of Plan TAC. So thanks, everybody. Jory, I'll hand it back to you.
Would help if I unmuted. Thanks, Ted. Is Miranda on? From WFRC. She has the next agenda item to give a legislative update. If not, we will skip her and go to Michaela. All right, Michaela, you ready?
I am ready.
All
Thanks,
right.
Jory.
I will hit up Miranda and see if she's going to join us.
This might cut short Ted's leaving up of the last Slido question because I will also be using Slido for my piece here. Ted, if you could share your screen, that would be lovely. So I am here to talk to everyone about an ordinance assistance opportunity. So WFRC is in the process of setting up to help communities with ordinance review and minor updates. This assistance would be at no cost to your communities. And the goal of it is to make planning assistance more accessible and to also respond to community needs for planning assistance a bit more nimbly and quickly. So this will be a new activity under the Transportation and Land Use Connection Program, and TLC will remain available to help with major code updates. So we do have a Slido for everyone today, and it's aimed at guiding our direction with this idea. And one thing to note about the Slido, the last question in my section asked if you're willing to share your city with us. You can remain anonymous if you want. If you do choose to share, we'll just use that information to follow up with you about any assistance needs that you suggested in your answers. I'll pause there. And Ted, will you? There we go. Okay. Which of the ordinances in your community do you consider the most dated? I know this doesn't necessarily apply to those who aren't representing a municipality, but if you've worked with or experienced one in your work in another way, please feel free to share. Some comments on parking already, sign ordinances. More on parking, e-bikes, multifamily, commercial design standards. More on signs, more parking, landscaping, density requirements, outdoor lighting, short-term rentals, a great variety so far, lots of parking. I think your parking modernization study will be really useful and relevant, Julie. Give a few more minutes to talk about these or to enter in your ideas for these. The entire zoning chapter. If anyone also wants to share out loud what some of your community's struggles are with updating the ordinances that you know are outdated, I think that could be really useful for us to hear and for others to hear. See pedestrian crossings.
I can speak to the parking and updating that. Our metro townships are going through a comprehensive code update right now of all of our subdivision and zoning ordinance. And parking was one that was really tricky to find good case studies on. And a lot of recommendations are to kind of, from APA and things are to just get rid of parking requirements altogether, or at least parking minimums. But in our communities, it kind of feels like we're not quite there yet, especially in some of our more suburban communities like Kearns. And so it was really difficult to find that balance in between of model codes that we could kind of look to that weren't those urban centers to base our standards off of.
As far as I know that. Thanks, Kayla. And I know that. Okay, I didn't know if that was another person commenting. Does anyone else have any comments on parking? Or on sign ordinances that's come up? Oh, I hear an unmute. Did someone want to share? Okay, it looks like this question slowed down a bit, so let's go to the next one. And if you think of others, you can always message us them afterwards. So this one is, which, if any, ordinances mismatch with your community's desired quality of life outcomes? So in other words, do you have an established vision in any of your plans, your general plan, station area plans, any sort of plans that your current ordinances don't exactly turn out fulfilling that vision the way that you're hoping they do? See more on parking and signage coming up. Street design standards. Design standards and zoning districts, parking. ADUs and twin homes, street design standards, quality commercial development, street connectivity and cross access, pedestrian friendly development, parks. So lots on design standards so far for this question. Does anyone have a success story with design standards or a case study that they've used that's been helpful with this?
So like I mentioned, we're drafting right now, so we don't have anything adopted yet, but for a lot of our multifamily and mixed use zones, we started looking to the Missing Middle Housing website, and they have a lot of really great standards about what model development should look like. And so we kind of took the standards that they provided and tried to work those into our code. And I'm happy to share that in the chat.
That would be great. Thanks, Kayla. I know Salt Lake County has, and the Utah Foundation have done a lot of work on missing middle things too, and they might be able to be a resource with that.
I'm sure they would be absolutely thrilled to hear that you're utilizing that in your code rewrite right now.
All right, looks like the responses have slowed down for this one, so let's move on. Which, if any, of your ordinances have potential inconsistencies with state law? This may be ordinances that the community's particular concerns about or has a hard time just with timing, with updates, things like that.
I think if you want to, you could answer this of, well, what what state law are you thinking about, perhaps, instead of which ordinance are you thinking about? I think either way is helpful for us.
Definitely. Thanks, Ted. That's a really good point. See, we have traffic codes, speed limits, local road widths, and compliance with the International Fire Code.
And I
Process.
guess Michaela, I'm sorry to interrupt you. And I think this may also just be interesting for us as peers to kind of see what each other is struggling with or thinking about. And with an eye to that, we will send this out, but anonymously. So you'll get this, you'll get the results of this after the meeting.
We have another on International Fire Code, short-term housing, subdivision ordinances, local roads, subdivision, more on fire code. Administrative subdivision amendment process and exceptions. Give a few more minutes for this one. Someone be willing to elaborate on their micro mobility provider data comment? I'm curious if you could explain more about that one.
Yeah, this is Julianne in Salt Lake, and I don't know how it's progressed because I haven't been that close to it, but I know that when we first got scooters and, you know, dockless e-bikes and that kind of thing in our city, there was a pretty big push from those companies for us to not be able to require data from those companies. And so, we do have access to data, some of the data now. But it's so important when we're trying to plan to really understand how, new modes in our city affect the mix. So.
Thank you. Julian, that's a great problem. Has anyone else had struggles around micromobility ordinances? Well, thank you, Ted. This one should be a quicker answer. How often do developers find your code difficult to navigate? We have almost always, sometimes, never, and I have no idea. It's like just exactly half say sometimes, a good chunk say almost always, and a small group say I have no idea. Does anyone want to
offer a comment? I find a lot of our development partners just don't even bother to look. They just are submitting things that, they've done in other communities, and they just, I don't know, it just seems like they want us to redline everything. They're just not even looking at the standards.
I would second that. We've had that problem a lot, and we're also finding because some of these companies are so short-staffed right now, their contractors will submit the same plans over and over because they don't have time to fix them. So they're really relying on us to make the changes to show what would be appropriate. And it's really tough for our staff to handle that.
Yeah, I'd agree as well. They play dumb like a fox.
So I'm actually a consultant that works on a lot of these types of projects. And something that I've noticed from city to city is the way that cities develop their codes or design their codes or place standards are different for every single city. And so when you look for one city and you try and find the parking code or something, it's not in the development part, it's in some other random piece of the code. And I've noticed that's probably the biggest issue that most of the developers we work with have with cities, and having some sort of rhyme or reason to where they put what they put in those codes.
Yeah, I was wondering if this challenge is that developers are reusing things that they have used in other cities, like in San Francisco or in Chicago, or is it more a challenge about the different cities within our region?
I think for the most part, developers try to do the first plan submittal according to our code. And then when we give a first review of comments back, most of them do a pretty good job at addressing them. In our city, in Sandy, every week on Monday morning, we hold a development review meeting with a representative from every department in our city, where the concept plan is presented to us for the first time. We can give our immediate feedback and comments on it. And I think that's really helpful to developers to help guide them on what our initial standards are. So I think if, there are places where you're having a hard time getting developers to understand the standards, maybe there is a communication gap that's needed to be filled to help guide them where those standards are, because they are right. Every city's different, and they are all different on where they place those standards within their code or standard detail drawings.
Just to chime in again, I agree 100% with what you just said. If it is going to be different, or if you are linking to something that others may think that it should go in that part of the code and it's not there, link to it. It's not that difficult to link somewhere else. So that if it's not in this area, just throw in a link at the bottom of that part of that code that leads to wherever that section is. Because if you touch on something in 3 different spots, more often than not, I've found that they contradict each other. And so you just have to choose.
Thanks, everyone. Any final comments on this question before we move on? Okay, this is just the last one. If you're willing to share your city with us, just so in the background data we can link to it, and we don't have to share screen for this one, Ted. Thank you.
But Michaela, when he shared screen, we would know which cities were paying attention and answering the question.
We had a pretty lively discussion, so I'd say you got good attention there. So I just wanted to share a few more words before I wrapped up. So thank you all so much for sharing with us, and for those of you who shared the reasoning behind some of your responses too. I think it's really helpful to hear. So what we're thinking with this ordinance assistance is that we offer in-house WFRC staff planning assistance to communities in our region to evaluate your code for gaps, barriers, or contradictions, to identify parts of your code that maybe your community needs or wants but are not present, or that maybe you have parts of your code that are not best practice that you're trying to identify, as well as to help with minor code updates to meet your needs and best practice recommendations. For example, we could evaluate some parking requirements and suggest changes to meet community goals like walkability, things like that. For major code updates, we'd still direct you and connect you with the standard transportation and land use connection technical assistance option. And then there's another idea with this that we would love your reactions to. We could create a sounding committee of like an architect, an engineer, a developer, a planner, and maybe a land use attorney, and ask them for their review or recommendations on our work when it's fully drafted. The goal here is for feedback from professionals who would be interacting with your code. And this review could be optional, or it could be conducted without your city being identified, if that's a concern to you. So we wanted to pause here and hear your feedback on that. Would this professional review opportunity be something of value to you and your community?
Yeah, this is Todd with Draper City. I think that something like that would have some value to be able to maybe test new ordinance rewrites or things like that. And maybe kind of a blind study to see if they are indeed interpreted as we think they will be.
Great. Okay, I know I'm a little over time, so I'll limit additional comments. Feel free to add thoughts in the chat or message me directly. But thanks, everyone. We will keep you updated on rolling out this process and how to apply.
Thanks, Michaela. We've stirred up in the bushes. I found Miranda hiding. I'm joking. She's joined us to give us a legislative update. He's had a lot of fun, I think, hanging out up at the Capitol over the last few weeks, month, and probably for the next month. So Miranda, all yours.
Awesome. Thanks, Jory. Yeah, you could say it's fun. You could also say it's challenging. The legislative session is I do enjoy it, right? Like, or else I wouldn't be doing this work. But the 45 days that is legislative session is very busy and challenging, but it's a good time. So I'll be really brief with my update. I kind of just want to let everyone know what's going on right now, what we can kind of expect coming out of the legislative session. So we have about 2.5 weeks left of the legislative session, and we're kind of at that point where some key decisions are being made, where some critical pieces of legislation are being passed, and where funding items are being determined on whether or not they'll be funded. So let's maybe just start with appropriations and a few things that might be helpful for you all to be aware of. So the way appropriations move through the process is throughout the first half of session, appropriation subcommittees meet and they hear the various funding requests from local partners, from state agencies, from different legislators on things that should be funded. And then they go ahead and rank and prioritize funding requests that they then send to the Executive Appropriations Committee, who ultimately decide how things will be funded. So right now, those rankings have been done, and EAC, Executive Appropriations Committee, are meeting. They're determining ultimately how much revenue the state has to spend on the, I think there's upwards of $3 billion worth of appropriation requests this year. They're making those big, decisions on what should be funded. And then next week or the week after, we'll see those funding bills that all the appropriations are included in. So just wanted to note a few appropriations that I think are interesting. These are some of the WFRC key funding priorities. Some of them tie with some legislation as well. So tied to multimodal transportation funding, trails, active transportation, transit, and roadway. Let's start with active transportation. There is a request for a active transportation investment fund, or an ATIF. So this would be an ongoing funding source for trails, for UDOT, for the Transportation Commission to prioritize, which would go to connect our various communities with paved non-motorized trails. So that would be about $44 million annually. And that one is included in a bill right now that just passed the Senate, which we're really happy about. This includes the governor's trail network proposal that UDOT and the governor's office announced together, and this would accomplish that. Hugh can probably throw in the chat here, but WFRC, along with our partners at UDOT, UTA, Mountain Land Association of Governments, and other key partners, sent out a trail support letter with over 400 signatures. Hopefully some of you are on that, asking for the legislature to fund and to invest in our active transportation network through this funding. And so we just gave those letters to the Senate yesterday, and then now as it moves on to the House, we'll be sharing those that support letter with them as well. On top of that, there's some one-time money that's been requested for the Active Transportation Investment Fund, and that was ranked very favorably by the Appropriations Subcommittee. So then with transit, over the past few years, the legislature has put a lot of one-time funding towards different transit projects, double tracking of Front Runner, Point of the Mountain. Nothing for Front Runner is being proposed currently, but not to say that they wouldn't put more one-time funding towards that project. There has been a proposal for more funding towards Point of the Mountain transit. It didn't rank very favorably by the committee, but we know that has been stated to be a priority of some of the legislature, and so there's the potential of seeing that get funded later on in the legislative process. A few other things, and maybe what I'll actually do instead of just running through everything, I've put together an appropriations tracker, a spreadsheet which shows all of the different transportation, air quality, housing related appropriation requests that are out there currently, and gone ahead and put how much is being requested. And then if it was ranked by an appropriation subcommittee, I've included that ranking here as well. So feel free to just go through that. There's a lot of links on there that link to additional information. Back to our three-prong approach. Transit, there is another appropriations request that was out there, and that was for a zero fare one-year transit pilot. I think this one, it hopefully isn't news to anyone. It actually got a lot of media coverage, but unfortunately, we're not seeing a lot of favorable support from the legislature on this particular request. Nothing's done until the session is over, of course, but sometimes things take multiple years to get through and get funded, and so that's kind of where zero fare transit is at. And then lastly, for roadway appropriations, the legislature has indicated before session began and then now throughout session that one of their priorities is to start paying down existing transportation debt. The Utah Department of Transportation has a bunch of GO or general obligation bonds for transportation projects over the past several years. And one of the ideas is to set aside a bunch of money so that it frees up the Transportation Investment Fund, which is currently paying the debt service on those bonds. And so we've yet to see where that will ultimately end up in the various rankings. I think they've put somewhere near $800 million proposed, again, not funded, but proposed towards paying down existing transportation debt. There's a lot more on there. Feel free to give a look, and of course, let me know if you have any questions on some of these. I'd be happy to discuss further. But lastly, I'll share our WFRC bill tracker. This is fairly up to date, almost to the day. I may have missed some bills that are out there this morning, but it shows the bills that we are tracking, that we're either actively working on or watching, and shows our priority status and proposed position or existing position based on what council members have supported. There's a lot on here. I'd say the ones that you'd want to spend some time looking at are those that are priority number one, because those are going to be the most impactful in this space. Like I mentioned, the Trails Network bill, that's SB 185, that just passed through the Senate. That definitely is one of our priority bills that we've been working on. There's a number of other bills that are making some changes, a number of housing bills out there. There's one that was dropped currently for a first-time home buyer, what's it called? A first-time home buyer kind of loan fund that was being proposed. There's active transportation bills. I don't know that I have any specific that I think are worth noting right now as in addition to the trails bill. But again, if you have any questions about these, please let me know. And Jory, is there anything specifically that you think this group could benefit from hearing? Sorry if that was a
I
little
think you
jumbled.
covered
Okay.
quite a bit of it, but I'd open it up if anybody has maybe some specific questions or had heard through the grapevine of something coming down. You might have a little bit more insight, so I'd open it up to the group if anybody has questions. And Miranda, you have a government affairs update weekly email that you send out. Or who do we send that to, or how does somebody get on that list?
Yeah, well, so you're welcome to reach out to me directly if you want to. If you are interested in getting those emails, you could probably reach out to Jordan or Rosie here in the chat and let them know that you want to be added to those. It's a little more in-depth information that I'm sharing right now. It kind of outlines some of the key bills and, more in depth some of the provisions in those bills. And so, yeah, we send those out weekly. So about every Friday, sometimes it gets out on a Saturday. That kind of outlines what happened this last week during session. What can we expect next week? So my next one will go out this Friday. So yeah, reach out to Rosie, Jordan, or myself, and we'll be happy to add you to that distribution list. So
in Miranda, it also looks like scanning through the one of them, it even discusses federal, some of our federal grants or updates on the national level. So I think it's good. It's all encompassing, local, state, federal, good resource here.
Yeah, thanks, Jory. Appreciate that plug.
Perfect. Well, last call for any questions for Miranda.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Thanks, Miranda. We'll see you this afternoon at our other TAC. Appreciate it. All right, Julie, you have been working pretty hard on a zero fare transit study. So hand the time off to you.
All right, thanks. Yeah, so Miranda mentioned that that the governor had proposed a 1-year zero fare pilot in his governor's budget, and that made it to one of the options in the appropriations ranking. Unfortunately, it finished in the bottom 15%, but it did finish above Point on Transit. So I feel like that is almost a win, since that is a really important project. But prior to the governor's budget, UDOT, UTA, MAG, and WFRC have been working on a regional zero fare study, looking at the impacts of what various scenarios of zero fare might be on ridership and on financial aspects for UTA. Sorry, there we go. So a little bit about the context of this study. Obviously, last February, there was the Fare-Free February that we saw to increase ridership across all modes at all times of the day, and got good feedback on that ridership, on safety, customer experience. There's been both in in last session, there were 2 bills that were run, one in the Senate and one in the House, looking at prohibiting UTA from charging fares. So this is obviously something that certain state leaders are taking seriously. And we know that we need, as we grow, for more people to use transit so that we can optimize our existing road system and provide people to more opportunities. So this study was looking at the sort of the data aspect. A lot of people have conversations about, well, oh, this might occur. And we were trying to answer the question, like, we know that these are the benefits or these are the drawbacks of zero fare transit. So one of the reasons to look at this is that if you look at UTA's budget and where that money is coming from, you'll see that the majority of UTA's budget is coming from local option sales taxes, primarily the first and second quarters, and part of the fourth, obviously. But that passenger and fare revenue is a very small portion. It's about 5% of the overall budget. And over time, that 5% over time, the money that UTA is bringing in via fares is a smaller and smaller portion of the actual operating cost. So there's, of course, operations, maintenance, and construction, and part of those fares go to operations, but are supporting less and less of that total operations cost. There's precedence within the state and within UTA for zero fare. Within UTA, of course, there are things like Fare Free February. There's this current week at the NBA All-Star Game. There's the Fare Free zone in downtown Salt Lake. And then there are certain routes that are fare free, zero fare. That would be UVX and Ogden when it gets done. And then across the state, of course, the majority of transit that's operating, with the exception of UTA, the Cedar Area Transit System, and SunTran and St. George, are all operating for free. So that's, of course, what's happening in Summit or High Valley, Park City, Logan, but also in the Uinta Basin, for instance. So this is not without precedent within the state. And just under half of UTA's riders pay full fare, which means that more than half of them are getting some type of discount already, whether that's in Salt Lake, there's the public school transit pass program, there's the Hive Pass. Of course, our university students are getting free transit. Employers, typically, a lot of employers have free transit, and then our human service agencies get a discount. And so this particular study, we had 4 goals. One was to look at how operations and finances and their community impacts of zero fare. We were trying to also gauge transit values of stakeholders, providing guidance for replacement funding for lost revenue. And then, of course, and foremost, was objectively informed decision-making, providing data and not just opinions or hypothesis. So we looked at 4 alternatives. One was the entire system would be zero fare. This would be on all modes at all times of day. Another alternative would be zero fare on bus only. And so that includes paratransit and then the on-demand, the VIA service. Zero fare for low-income riders would be option 3. And then the last alternative was just to reduce the overall fare to $1. And then this would reduce all other fares and passes. Yeah, so when we were looking at the alternatives, there were ridership increases for different modes. There was projected savings to UTA from either faster bus service and from collecting fares costs money. We have to pay for equipment. We have to pay for people to go through that money. So we do get savings if we're not using that equipment. And then there's, of course, increases to cost, because when we increase fixed route bus system, we also need to increase paratransit. And so that has a cost if there's overcapacity of buses and trains. For instance, the 2 route in Salt Lake is one that might be overcapacity. And so there are some additional costs with more riders. So in summary, if you looked across the 4 alternatives, you can see on the left of each one of these is the projected ridership increase, and then on the right is the projected cost increase. And so for that system-wide zero fare, we were predicting a 24 to 36% increase in ridership at a 8 to 9% increase in cost. And so you see that across all of the alternatives that we studied, there was an increase in ridership and a corresponding increase in cost as well. And then, so some possible paths forward is keeping the existing fare structure. UTA is due for an upgrade of its fare collection technology. So this is an increased cost in both the short and long terms. And we'll continue to see an increase in ridership from the pandemic lows, just because that's the trend that we're on right now. If we did a partial implementation, we would still need to upgrade that fare collection technology. And we would get sort of a modest increase in ridership. And then the system-wide, either a 1-year pilot, which is unlikely to be funded this year, or permanent, we wouldn't have to purchase that new fare technology, but there would be a semi-significant amount that would need to be made up in lost revenue. Again, that's at $35 to $38 million, but we would get quite a bit of ridership increase as well. So there's pros and cons. So that was the study that we completed earlier this year. Like I said, there was this option to have this 1-year pilot study allocated or appropriated in this legislative session. It doesn't look like that's going to happen, but there is a pilot or another fare-free week this week with the NBA All-Star game, and then we'll see what happens from here. But I just wanted you guys to be aware of what the study that the 4 transportation agencies in the region conducted, and just what some of those outcomes were projected to be. So I'm happy to answer any questions. We'll be posting this on our website in the next week or so, but if you want it in the meantime, I'm happy to share it with anyone who's interested. Julianne?
Yeah, Julie, maybe you said this, I accidentally muted you for part of your presentation, so apologies for asking you to repeat yourself, but what do we know approximately what the cost of the fare collection upgrades would be? It seems like that's pretty significant, and I'm wondering if UTA is going to need to move forward with that at some point, and it could end up being wasted dollars. Seems like there's a lot of public support for zero fare, if not legislative.
Alex isn't on here. Is anyone from UTA? Yeah, let me get back to you, because if I think I have a number off the top of my head, but I don't want to be misquoted if it's wrong. But I do have that number.
I'm thinking, Julie, it's 30 to 40 million. I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, something like that. And then there's Mary, there's an annual cost as well, right?
Yeah, and plus there's our staff, employees who have to collect it and things like that.
And did you factor in just the cost of enforcement and the cost of the people that go out and actually, especially cash fares? I know that that's pretty labor intensive.
Yeah, we didn't make any assumption that there would be a reduction in staff or cost of enforcement, because the idea is that those individuals who are patrolling enforcement right now could be then reallocated to safety concerns, or either on board or at the platforms.
Like transit
and
ambassadors.
Because
but transit ambassadors we'd like to have more of.
Yes.
Yeah, and because they're already UTA is shifting from the kind of enforcement to that, what Mary's talking about, the ambassadors, and providing that safety and security.
Thanks.
Hey, Julie, I got a question. I could just ask you at the office, but I'm curious if the study puts the ongoing cost for no fare transit in terms of what the sales tax would need to be to support that, and whether that strategy is something that's been in the discussion or.
We didn't do a projection of like additional sales tax revenue increase. We, there's this amount that would need to be made up, whether it's system-wide or partial. And part of that, could be made up by which is what the governor assumed. People who are paying now for past programs, continuing to pay for those past programs. Whether that's like more cities would give in revenue, but we didn't say like this 34 million equates to, like half of a additional local option sales tax quarter in Salt Lake County or something.
And do we know what the sort of institutional pass revenue is per year?
I do, it's in the report, but I don't have it off the top of my head.
Okay. Seems like it's probably like 10 to 12-ish million just based on the 35-25, but I don't know. I'm just ballparking that in my head.
Yeah, let me get back to you on that. Let me get back to you on that.
Okay.
Julie, being a former transit user for about 10 years when I worked for Salt Lake City and loved the transit system, there's a lot of secondary positive impacts from increasing ridership. Probably a little harder to measure, but was that something you had considered as far as telling the story? I mean, improvement in health, more ridership also makes TOD development more attractive. There's just a lot of other financial benefits that come along with improving our transit system.
Yeah, we did. We didn't try to quantify the impact of zero fare on development. We did look at what that might mean on like congestion and the transportation system, but not on land use and development. Yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of other benefits that wasn't within the scope of this particular study, which was more looking at the ridership and then the financial impact. Yeah.
I assume the hurdle really is just a bias against leadership that really values public transit.
You would think, because I mean, we've heard a lot of is security issues, and then people would rather have more service than pay for that. The transit riders need a skin in the game, and so they need to pay their share of transit riders. Unfortunately, there's not a similar appropriation for $25 million more for service improvements. So, I guess one would expect that if people don't want to pay, if people don't want to pay for the zero fare because they want to do service improvements, that you would hope then they would fund those service improvements. But
good work.
Julie, this is Nestor Gallo from West Jordan City. I am the traffic engineer, and I evaluate the level of service of some of the roads within our network. As we keep growing, most of the roads moving traffic east-west will be failing without any more room for right-of-way acquisition or road widening. The option for public transportation is probably is very appealing. We have a network with highways and the front runner to move traffic north-south. But in the near future, I mean, in the next 10 years, we're going to be adding more than 3 million new trips. And those east and west roads will be gridlocking. And was this part of the equation presented to the legislators that we need to start thinking about public transportation as a next option for moving traffic more efficiently throughout the county?
yeah, no, the governor's budget, which was where that appropriation came from, was talking about growth and what you're talking about, but didn't specify. I think that all of the legislators knew that, obviously there's a ridership increase, but again, it was that some of the other aspects, either whether it was the bias towards transit or the skin in the game, or that there were other transit improvements that were higher priority, like double tracking front runner. And so I don't know, Matt, is there anything in like the 5-year service plan or what you guys have been talking about with the long range transit plan about that east-west improvement?
I'm not as familiar with the 5-year service plan as maybe I should be, because I'm in strategic. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have a good answer for you though.
Okay. Julianne, is your hand again, or was that just, okay?
It is again, but I wanted to do all the talking. But as far as the 5-year service plan, I do think there are increases in frequency to routes like the 205, you know, some of that east-west connectivity and getting more of a grid. It's a little harder as you get into more suburban areas. But the question that I had was, you know, you mentioned that there's a lot of people that are riding for free now through things like EcoPass programs. And I think that those tend to be underutilized if, for example, you have, you know, you and your spouse want to go somewhere together and you have an EcoPass and your spouse doesn't, that it can tip the decision to ride transit. And so I guess I just wonder if these big institutions that are doing EcoPass programs instead invested those resources toward free fare throughout the region, would that reduce the funding that would be needed? Because it seems like between December 13th and February 1st, we pulled together the money we needed for free fare February last year. That was pretty fast scrambling, but I guess I just wonder, is there a willingness out there of people to invest resources in this outside of the legislature funding it?
Yeah, I know that the assumption wasn't that 25 million, that I think it was 13 million would be made up for by people continuing to pay their past program dollars. I know that UTA was going to reach out to some of those agencies, and I don't know if they ever did or what came out of that. But I know that from other conversations I've had that people are interested, private businesses are interested in helping to fund that, the lost revenue. And like you said, I mean, the other problem with the current discount programs, for instance, with, and this is why you saw in the 4 scenarios that the low income zero fare didn't have that great of a ridership increase, is that they all require you to do something. And so whether that's, you know, employer passes typically are just given to you, but the discounted fares that exist already for low income, you have to prove that you're low income. Even the Hive Pass, and I don't know, Julian, how it operates now, but I was a first generation Hive Pass holder. And back then you had to go to the public utilities building in person and show that your utility bill, or that you had, you know, you actually lived in Salt Lake. And so all of those things require somebody to then do something else above and beyond to prove to get that discount. That was the great thing about the public school transit pass program. It was just handed out in school. And so I think you're totally right. I mean, in my family, we all have pass programs either from our employers or from the public school transit pass program. And so it makes it easy for our family to go. But if only one person in my family had it, right, then we would be paying for 3 other people, and a round trip at $5 is $15 every time we want to go somewhere, when most of the region is, you know, free parking, gas isn't that expensive compared to, you know, Europe, if Vindelin is still on the call. And so I totally agree with you. I think that the fare is a major barrier, especially even if you have part of your family has a discount or part of your family has a pass, and those existing discount programs have a barrier to entry as well. And all of that, I think, impacts ridership.
Follow up to some of the things that you just said. Do you think, like, and being a realist, do you think that business owners would still chip in money if it's free? I mean, if I was running a business and we were paying for it, and then the state said, oh, it's now free, I would stop.
Yeah, I'm not sure if SOMAS I mean, I don't know if the benefit to Somas would be that great, but I think the university, the church, you know, I think these major players that are invested in the region, I think they would. Especially if that means that they're getting the same service, right? Okay, Ted is alerting me on multiple methods of communication that we need to move on to the next thing. So yeah, I thank you. I got a couple messages for people who were interested in seeing the results. If anyone else, feel free to message me on the chat. And of course, you can always call or email me if you want to talk more. Thanks, everyone.
Good job, Julie. It's hard to stop the one item that we had the most engagement on. So I was willing to let it go for a while because it showed that the rest of the group here has a little life in them. So that was good. Ted, parking modernization. Let's see if you can equal Julie's engagement in
I know that was awesome. And by the way, this is jointly with Julie. So this is like the Ted and Julie show. I think we've talked about the parking modernization effort with you all. Actually, Julie, do you want to do 2 sentences on what the parking modernization project is? And then I'll introduce the questions.
Sure. Yeah, so we had 2 phases of the parking modernization. One was, and together they focus a lot on what the impacts to our local communities, economic development, and land value, for instance, are on how parking impacts that. And then what are some techniques that we can use as communities or as individual developments to correct our parking. We're not saying necessarily to reduce parking, but just to modernize it and ensure that the parking that we are providing isn't totally, the supply is not totally outweighing the demand. You all know you have areas in your communities where we're overbuilt on parking, and that overbuilt parking is taking away from housing opportunities or other economic development opportunities, whether that's parks or businesses. And so this study is looking at how to identify if you have overbuilt parking and what are some strategies on correcting that and preventing it from in the future.
Okay, and so that's kind of like the high level here. And what we are doing is working with the consulting team, starting to put together what is the package that goes out. Now, let me be clear. Part of the idea here is that this doesn't just speak to the parking nerds like us. That this might reach out and entice a community, a city councilor, a planning commissioner to explore this issue of having more efficient parking, even if they aren't thinking about it already. So broadening the audience. If that is the objective, broadening the audience, we'd like your help. And so that we'd like to use just a few minutes of focus grouping this group. I don't know how many of you are listening to me right now. So we'll see how this goes. But put yourself in the mindset of your middle planning commissioner and middle city councilor. All right. Don't answer these questions from your perspective. Answer what do you think would be interesting, compelling, or a critique that they would have. Okay, so you're in their mindset. If you don't work for a city, just think of a typical like local government rep who doesn't sort of live within the space of planning regulation. Okay, so focus groupie, back to the Slido. But Slido plus discussion, this will take half a dozen minutes. Here's question 1. With their mindset, what are the primary motivations that would lead them to explore a change in parking regulation, that would lead to rethinking parking regulation? We've got 6 options, and then you can add you can say, well, you're missing a key motivation, but here's what we're looking for you to do. Rank these. Tell us what you think would be the most compelling message to broaden the audience and entice more people to explore parking reform. Hey, it can help us increase economic output. Hey, it could help us be more walkable too. 3, hey, it might help us with housing affordability. 4, well, we need to better respect private property rights. 5, hey, the private sector is better at making customized decisions about parking than we are with our codes. 6, parking is really context dependent, and national parking data for a one-size-fits-all parking regulation can't possibly help us be true to parking, to the effects of context on parking. So those are 6, but now I'll stop talking as you respond to these. What's missing?
Can I pipe in?
Go ahead, Chris.
I actually had a conversation like this with what I would describe as normie people recently at a party. And I think their biggest concern was like most people aren't that ideological about it. Like if we're talking about like private property rights or anything like that, like they don't necessarily care about that. They just want to have like convenient parking right in front of their house, right?
Right.
So for a lot of them,
and by the way, just we're going to get to what would be their critique. Why would they not want to do it? That is that's a future question. So, but keep on.
And so for them, I guess we're going to get to the critique portion, but I think like it was easier to have the conversation once they understood parking within the context of like the whole sort of systemic effort that we're trying to undertake. Because if you just say like it undermines walkability, well, they'll say, well, we're not there yet. So like, so you're just proposing making an awful situation for everybody and we have to wait like 30 years or, you know. So it's like, how do you place it within the context of everything we're doing and how we're sort of moving forward incrementally towards making more livable communities? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. I think I got you.
Hi, Ted. May I add my 2 cents?
Yes, please.
I think we need to look at it from the aspect of the land uses, because we have residential land uses, for instance, with an increased high density housing, and every parking ratio depends on access to public transportation. Either is buses or the front running nearby, though that parking ratio is lower. And if the public transportation is not accessible, that parking ratio goes up. Secondly, access to commercial areas. There are special events that trigger more traffic, more trips, and the need for parking. A good example is the Sundance Festival in Park City. Typically, those parking areas wouldn't be used during the year, but there are special events that trigger a tsunami of traffic and consequently a demand for more parking stalls. And third is, what is the impact of the post-pandemic parking needs? Because a lot of the employees are now working remotely and they don't need to drive and park at work. So these are variables that were not important 3 or 4 years ago, but the economy is changing so fast, and the pandemic created another shift on how we look at land uses and parking ratios and the number of trips generated by each land use.
I appreciate that, Nestor, and it's actually a perfect segue. I'm going to keep us going for the sake of time, but what your comment is the perfect cue up, because these are generalized motivations, and part of the rationale for a parking modernization, and even that phrase, is that the world has changed quite a bit very recently, And there's actually an imperative to changing parking now because of that. And so here's the next question. What is it about today's parking dynamics that would spark action to change parking regulation? In other words, create more of an imperative as opposed to just a generalized motivation. That's the difference here. So all of these 6 are new or new-ish dynamics rather than generalized motivations. There's a significant change in housing affordability. Construction costs have exploded, affecting structured parking. New state legislation and state interest in what cities are doing. Telework boom, transportation and Uber Lyft. What of these are the most compelling to spark interest in a change now? And what is missing? Verbalize what is missing from this list. If you put an other, would you be willing to tell us what the other is? We'll just take 1 minute on this.
Okay, so you gotta clean out, poking that out of a pavement section and just gonna pour color.
I think this, I'm going to go to the last question. We'll leave the last question.
Ted,
up.
so on this one, there are some people who are writing other, and so it is a question of
Okay.
whether they're putting other in there just because it's one of the options, or if there's actually an other that we should
Yeah,
be aware of.
And I encourage you, if you would, enter your other in the chat, and we will keep track of that. Here's the last question. We'll leave this question up as we start to wrap up the meeting here today. This is an open entry, so you write whatever you want. What are the most common or strongly held criticisms you would hear from that median commissioner, counselor, whomever, against the idea of parking reform? For example, hey, businesses without enough parking will fail. That's why we have our parking regulations. And there's a variety of these. What are the ones, remember, this is about communications. What are the ones that you would say to us, hey, look, you're putting together your communications, you have to speak to these criticisms. That's the idea here. And I'm going to leave this question up, but turn it back to Jory for the sake of time. Julie, do you have any parting thoughts on this before as we do that?
No, I was just going to mention that the timing of the study, hopefully we're wrapped up here in the next little bit. And then the idea is that this summer we'll be providing more information, whether it's about some of the concerns we've heard today and kind of like talking points, or the auditing work that Michaela mentioned. So hopefully in the next coming months, we'll have a lot of other resources to help communities think about this issue, fix parking code, get inspired moving forward.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks, everybody. And that question is still up, so by all means, please give us your thoughts on it. Jory?
Thanks, Ted. We are at 10:30, so item 7 was just a quick update on a few items. We won't take all 5 minutes. Hopefully everybody's able to just stick on for a couple minutes. If you have to leave, we understand. The RTP 2023 RTP is out for public comment. I just put a link in the chat. Looks like I needed to include the HTTP, so let me get that. Go on there, make a comment on any projects that you don't think are correct. Hopefully we got all these when we went out to our workshops this last fall. We also have a draft regional transportation plan, which documents the process. If you need clarification or have comments on that, there's a form on the bottom right of this page. And then also our draft air quality conformity memorandum that supports, or our plan supports, that air quality, showing that we're going to meet our air quality budgets in the future. So go to that. This is open till February 26th, so we have another 11 days. And by all means, call me, email me if you have questions specifically. Bert, you had a household travel survey. Just a quick blip on that, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, just a heads up to everybody that we are launching the statewide household travel survey. This week, actually, I think the mailings are dropping to randomly selected household addresses. And we'll be, conducting travel information from sort of a trip diary in a website format and a mobile app format from households and paying them generously in terms of gift cards for their time. That process will actually extend through early part of June. So it'll be sort of waves of recruiting households to participate in the survey. The last time we did this was in 2012. It was also a joint effort among the transportation partners, the 4 MPOs, WFRC, MAG, Dixie, Cash. UDOT also is a big partner, and so is UTA. So the survey, you may find yourself receiving a postcard or other invitation to participate in the survey, collect sort of a travel diary, trip diary over the course of either a day or a week. And then there, I believe Amazon gift cards or other types of gift cards that will be sent out to everyone who completes the survey. We're hoping to target about 9,000 households that actually complete the survey. And there's also a student survey for campuses that will probably be in the 3,000 or 4,000 range in terms of participants. So a big project for us. We'll have the data and the reports probably later in the summer. And all of that will be useful input for our travel models, but also sort of kind of just general transportation planning type information. We're also, the last point I'll make is we're also thinking about a follow-on survey that would utilize the recruitment and try to kind of get back with the households who participate a smaller sample, and we're hoping to do some follow-on planning topics on active transportation and housing and a few others. So I'll stop there and see if anyone has any questions. 2023 Household Travel Survey. Exciting stuff.
Thanks, Bert. Ted, I think you have the last couple of those. You want to hit them real quick?
Real quick. So you recall in our last meeting that we asked for those that are interested in kicking the tires on a context sensitivity project. That's a nerdly way of saying, how do we have roads, their design and function fit with the kinds of places that we want to create? And a handful of you put your name forward. That is still going to occur. You might be wondering, hey, whatever happened with that? There's just been a minor delay as we coordinate also with Mountain Land. We'd love to get you together with Utah County counterparts. So still stay tuned. Now, next thing, guiding our growth. This is the statewide growth conversation convened by the governor. Some of you are now serving on the technical committee for that. If others are interested, you're welcome. As a note, the next technical committee meeting for that is a week from today at 2:30. Last item for me, we have a chair for this committee, which is Dina Blaze. We are going to explore in the next meeting, open it up for nominations, those that want to serve as chair of this committee. So kindly think about whether you want to do that. It's not a huge time commitment. And you get to hang out more with Jory. So it's kind of an awesome thing. Think about that. If you have questions about
Chair
it,
and
please.
Ted.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say chair and vice chair.
Thank you.
I think it'd be good to get both of them. That way we have that way I'm not default backup.
Yeah, amen. And that's it from me, Jory. Back to you.
Perfect. Thank you all for staying a little late. Really appreciate our attendance today. I think it's probably one of our bigger attended TAC meetings. I think we almost hit about 60 people. Next meeting, April 19th, an important meeting for the RTP. We'll be asking you all to make a recommendation to Regional Growth Committee for approval of the Regional Transportation Plan. So hopefully we'll see you all then. We'll also be working on the agenda for that. So if you have any ideas or items you'd like to bring to this committee or group for discussion or make everybody aware, let me know or Ted know, and we'll make sure that that gets on the upcoming agenda. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. Looks like there's also some good chat going on right now in the chat, so I'm a little hesitant to shut the meeting down until everybody gets that over with, but appreciate everybody.
Thanks, Jory.
Thanks, Mike. Rosie or Jordan, you may mind